camps are setting their strategy. Xbox is all in on Game Pass, and Sony, the CEO of Sony, comes out right before the new year, right before 2024, and says, no, Game Pass sucks. Game Pass is not the way we're going. Game Pass just doesn't work. Now, that's what he says. I'm paraphrasing here. We're going to go through exactly what he says, but is that the right move for Sony? I don't think it is, and I've been watching some Sony guys talking about, hey, what's Sony going to do? Is it sustainable to continue with the blockbuster model at the expense that it is? Microsoft seems to have adjusted. Xbox seems to have adjusted to take that into account, that's just not sustainable, that it makes it so that these large game studios don't take risks because they're dependent on big budget games that nail it every time. And if you don't nail it, where you at? You're sunk, and that cost is sunk. So let's go through this. I've got a couple questions that I wrote down here that we could go through. What CEO said. I think he's wrong. I just do. And what's interesting is, as I see some PlayStation guys out there, because remember when Game Pass first dropped, people were like, well, that's not sustainable. This is just not going to work. It's not going to work. What the CEO said feels like 2 years too late. Like, he feels like he's 2 years behind the ball here. Now, granted, they're CEO speak. They may be working on something behind the scenes. You know, you don't give away your cards as a CEO on things you're working on. You know, you don't show everybody what's going on there. But here's what it is. So this is from thegamer.com. Sony is less interested in subscription services because people play one game at a time. That's exactly what he said. Don't expect Sony to try and rival Game Pass, as its CEO says that subscription services aren't particularly valuable right now. The key is right now. That's the key. Someone else said that maybe it's in this article, actually. I've read multiple articles on this point, but someone was saying like, oh, well, subscription services with gaming have stagnated, but that's just not true either. We know that rumors are that Game Pass is over the 30 millions now. It was at 23 for a while. It's, definitely not stagnant. I know people in my personal life, as I'm sure you do, who don't even own an Xbox, who have subscribed to Game Pass as well. The value is there. You're going to subscribe to it. And that's the key. I think the key is Game Pass. There's a very specific library that you need. There's a very specific infrastructure that you need for a Game Pass to work, and Xbox is building that and has that, especially with Activision Blizzard acquisition and the Bethesda acquisition. I mean, the amount of games that they have being developed at any one time is exactly what you need for a subscription service to last long term. So let's go down. This was in an interview late last year. Last year sounds like so long ago. Last month. In an interview last month, here's what he said. This is Yoshida over at the CEO. He's the Sony CEO. Konichiro Yoshida is his name, and I'm totally butchered that. I'm sorry. Well, this doesn't work on black and white. Let me actually remove this highlight so you guys can see, because there we go. Just works much better here. Does this work? That works better. Okay. He says, we do subscription business models, but at the same time, he says, people usually play one game at a time. So an all-you-can-eat type of subscription service with many games may not be so valuable compared with video streaming services. He continues, explaining Sony's current strategy. We have balanced a hybrid service on PlayStation Network subscription as well as pay per content. So he says Sony's not going to go all in. Essentially what we can extrapolate from that is Sony's not going to go all in on Game Pass. They're going to approach it from, yes, we have a type of subscription model, but then we also have a pay per content. He also seems to be, and it does seem to be, that everyone is going in on the streaming side of things, but he compares it directly to video streaming. He says most people play one game at a time compared to videos, where you can watch a movie today, you can watch a movie tomorrow, you can watch like 3 different TV shows that you're keeping up with at the same time. I don't think his logic is incorrect there at all. I think that logic makes sense to me. However, it's not about how many games you play at once. It's about value proposition, especially as Sony raises all their game prices, as everybody across the board raises their video game prices, while making more money in video games than ever made before via transactions, via live game updates, stuff like that. the value is only going to get bigger. So the question is Sony right? I don't think they are. At least on this, I think if they're not working on something to rival Game Pass, maybe they just can't. Then they have to come up. It doesn't mean that they're sunk. It doesn't mean that they're done. There's a lot of hyperbole out there, like, oh, Sony's done. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means they have to come up with some sort of alternative value proposition, or they have to figure out how to navigate these waters where the competition is going in a completely different direction. Now, remember, I've said this before. Phil Spencer has said in the past that they don't view PlayStation or Nintendo as their competition. They view Amazon, Apple, Google as their competition, and that's largely because of streaming. And those three all are jumping into gaming. Those three all have streaming services in there. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. I like it. I like the strategy here of seeing what each entity is doing, where they're going, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, stuff like that. So again, I think it's going to be interesting. Here's the questions that I wrote down for this. Number one, do you agree with Sony's CEO that subscription models like Game Pass are not effective for the gaming industry? Why or why not? I do not. I said this already. I do not agree with it. I think they are effective for the gaming industry. I'll give you an example that we talked about this week, Pal World. Pal World is a huge success. I mean, I think we're closing in on 8 million. It may be the biggest selling game, fastest selling game of all time. It's about to break records. I would not have checked it out, or I'd be late to the game checking it out if it were not on Game Pass. Game Pass, I downloaded it on day one because I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Let me jump in and try it out. And there's no risk to me to trying it out because it's a part of my Game Pass subscription. That is why I think it is effective for the gaming industry. We also consume all of our media via streaming services. I do not buy anything individually. Let's look at music, for instance. And I get the point that he's making, that you only play one game at a time, but that's not true either. That's just not true either. My kids play multiple games at a time. They have multiple games installed, and they don't just play one game. Yes, you can only play one game at a time, but you can also only watch one television show at a time. You're not multi-streaming different television shows. Now, games are longer, of course, but you have a variety there. And I can see the longer that I've been in Game Pass, the longer, especially with children, it benefits families. I will never buy my kids a video game. I don't think I've ever bought my children. I bought myself a video game since Game Pass, but I've never bought my children because I don't need to. Why? They're kids. You play what's available to you. Yeah, and here's what's available to you. I don't need to go spend $70 on you. I'm spending $14.99 for or $16, a month on something that we can all enjoy. And the value proposition is just there. 1,000% it's there. So yeah, I don't agree with the CEO that subscription models like Game Pass don't work. I actually think you're in danger of getting caught in no man's land with this hybrid model. I really do, because what are you best? I mean, you're best at obviously these major blockbuster hits, but you get caught in, why should I subscribe to your kind of okay service, compared to Nintendo, who's all in on a specific type of subscription service compared to Game Pass. What is Sony offering me with their subscription service? Not that the value's not there right now. I'm just saying, if you don't go, you risk having too many options and not being the best at any of those options. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying there? Anyways, maybe not. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with Sony's CEO that the subscription model like Game Pass isn't going to work? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below. Next question. How might Sony's reluctance to fully embrace subscription services impact the PlayStation brand and its competition with Xbox? Well, that's the interesting part. I think that's what we're going to see play out here. This means that Sony has to deliver on world-class AAA big budget games. Xbox, in my mind, has a little bit more leeway with that because it doesn't have to have a AAA blockbuster title, world-class game that competes with the God of Wars of the world, the Naughty Dogs of the world. It has to have variety. It can have a lot of A's and no A pluses. Now, A pluses are going to help it, absolutely. But if it just has a lot of A's, a lot of B's, and then a lot of varieties and a lot of different genres, the value is there. The value is there because of variety. Variety is the value. The big blockbusters get you hype, get you exposure, get you new players. And so I think there's less pressure that way. In fact, Xbox, Phil Spencer, we know that Xbox, in the documents that were leaked during the Activision Blizzard acquisition, or not leaked, but, as a result of that, the court all the findings in those documents that were released. There we go. They discussed this. They discussed as it's like pressure release valve for that. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think it puts a lot of pressure on Sony to deliver on these AAA titles, and I don't know that that's sustainable. I don't know that that's sustainable. Just because you're on top at one point doesn't mean you'll always be on top in any industry. Last question, what are the potential long-term effects of subscription models on game development, variety, and innovation in the industry? Again, I think we're going to be seeing this. We're going to wait and see how this plays out. Right now, my theory, my thought, and I agree with a big surprise. I'm an Xbox guy. I agree with the Xbox take here, is that I think it will help innovation. Because it's this pressure release valve, you get innovation from the big guys because they don't always have to deliver on these AAA games. There's a built-in audience with the Game Pass subscription. And for the little guys, there's a built-in audience here. I can get exposure to my game that would otherwise be very hard for me to get. And I think it's a win-win. So I think it's going to increase it. I think it's going to help it. And think about all the tools that are coming that are making game development easier. Now, game development is always going to be difficult, of course, but it's making it easier, more cost-effective with AI and the like. So I think we're just entering. We're at the dawn of the golden age of gaming, is something that I've said before, and I believe that to the core of my being. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. There we go. That's today's story, guys. I think Sony's wrong, but they may be right. This is what the CEOs get paid the big bucks for, to make these kind of decisions, to go forward, to have a vision, despite the criticism, whether it's Xbox or Sony, and to see how the cards fall and to see how they have success. And it's not to say one doesn't have to gobble up the other. It's not a binary economy that we live in, where it's winner take all. I mean, there is winner take all if that happens, but you don't need to. You can. Both are having success side by side. Like, you don't have to. And there's more competition coming up, and I think we're going to see more and more competition as game development becomes games become a main source of entertainment, and as game development becomes easier. Again, Google, Apple, Amazon, all jumping into games in the last 10 years, and it's only going to increase. So, love to know what you guys think. Let me know again in the comments below. Where am I right? Where am I wrong? Like this video. Subscribe to this channel if you like what we're doing here. I like to think of this as a daily mini podcast where we just hang out, talk games, go over the news story of the day. I give my opinion. You tell me where I'm wrong, and we go from there. Love hanging out with you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.